this.
All right, Todd, you're in charge of the gavel. Bam, there we go. All right, well, let me introduce our panel here, and if this, by chance, would happen to be your first time at one of our roundtable discussions, here's how we work things. I'm just a moderator. I'll put some topics out. I like quotes, so I'm going to throw, today's a really good day for that, as we honor the late Bob Weikert, and got some quotes there. We're going to throw those out and have the panel discuss it. We're just going to do some reminiscing, but if any time throughout today's program anyone out there has questions, remembrances, comments, please raise your hand and we'll recognize you, and we'll have the panel respond as they're able. So here's who we have up here. To my right, in this order, we have Mr. Todd Weikert, Mr. Ike Weikert, and this guy here, Randy Wolfe. I'm sure that's a name that rings a bell. Mr. Charlie Garrett, legendary engine builder, is with us today. And then the guy on the end there, Mr. Paul Pitzer. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. We certainly appreciate it. So we got the wireless mic ready. And Todd, you're in charge of the gavel, yes?
Got it.
That's how that's working? All right. All right. So let's, first things first, I'm going to have a seat here. And Todd, I guess since you're closest, I'll go ahead and start with you. First off, thanks for being here. It's certainly a pleasure to meet you. Your dad was a larger-than-life figure, I think, in the world of sprint car racing, and to put that into perspective, we think about the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, we think about, legendary drivers over the years, but, I mean, here's a car owner that was inducted into the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame who strikes me as somebody who's a self-made man, just somebody that worked hard, had an interest, played hard, and then as a result was very successful. Talk about some of your early memories of maybe going to the races and how your dad got involved with sprint car racing.
Well, I got three other brothers, and we all went to the races a few times, and then we invited Dad to go along, and he went a few times, and then he took a couple times, and he said, I'm going to own a race car. So 1970, he bought a race car, or 71 I guess it was, and started with Richard Lupo, and it evolved from there. And he, like you had mentioned, he was very passionate about the sport, and it wasn't just the racing, it was the people, the camaraderie of everybody that surrounds the sport. And but he liked it was the competition level that I think that really made Dad stand out as a car owner, because he didn't like second. And in today's world, when you run 80, 90 races, which is a lot of races a day, if you win 10 or 15 of them, you're pretty happy. And if you get 10 or 15 seconds, you're pretty happy. And Pop would have been pissed off. He wouldn't have liked that.
Yeah.
But it was his mentality. That's the way he ran life.
That's a perfect segue. I'm glad you mentioned that, Todd, because not having ever met him, everything I read about him, everything I remember about him as a kid, with his speeches in Victory Lane and so forth, he struck me as someone that was extremely competitive, or would be extremely competitive, regardless of what he was doing. Whether it's racing and his business, it seemed like he pursued excellence. Is that a fair assessment?
That's very well said. He and it was everything, and he instilled that to my 7 siblings and myself. That he didn't want you to settle them for a second. That he wanted you to exceed whatever you try to do, and it instilled in all of us.
You mentioned got his start 71, buys the first car. Richard Lupo's the driver, and as I understand it, he was successful right off the bat. I think he won the first couple outings after he switched over to like a Trevis Craft from an Edmunds car, I think. Earlier. Does that sound right?
He got the first car he got off of Floyd Travis. Floyd told him to come to Jennerstown, and Floyd and I think his boy Ronnie was there, and he told him that we'll set the car up for you, and he told Dad, he said, I'll have that car so easy that you could drive it. And it damn sure, Richard went out, and that's when Lou Blaney was, Lou Blaney was the kingpin in Western Pennsylvania, and Richard went out and he won that show and come back the next week and won.
And we look down the list of drivers that have been behind the wheel for your dad over time. I mean, it's a pretty impressive list of pilots there. Next guy in line, as I recall, was a fellow out of the Kansas City area. Is that right?
Oh yeah, of course Kenny Weld. That if you look back through the history books, that record speaks for itself. And they were quite the team. And everybody knows anything about racing knows what kind of an innovator and what kind of a racer Kenny Weld was.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, your dad starts off on a positive note with Richard Lupo. I mean, there's winning there, and this is going back to his competitive spirit. Kenny Weld comes on board end of 1971, 72, 73, they go out to Knoxville, and they win the Nationals.
Yeah,
that's big medicine.
That was real big, and after being out there the last, I missed quite a few years out there, but being there the way they got it built up today, and then seeing what the Knoxville Nationals meant back in the early 70s, it doesn't seem like it was a big a deal back then, but it was just as big to win that thing back then as it was today. It's not recognized that way.
Unfortunately, it didn't pay quite as well back then. I think Kenny won $3,000 for his efforts. And of course, $3,000 goes a lot further then than it does today. But you're right, they've really made something of the Knoxville Nationals, and the folks out there are to be commended for that. Down the line here, Randy, Charlie, Paul, anytime you guys have something you want to chime in, feel free to. Todd, we're going to come back to you. If you would pass the microphone over to Ike. Ike, thank you for being here, brother. Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Some of your remembrances of the early years, your dad getting involved with racing.
In 1972, when I went to
Hold that a little bit closer.
in 1972 when I went to the Knoxville Nationals, we all piled in a truck and drove out the road, and all we ate was hamburgers. And we didn't eat much. When you traveled with Kenny Weld, it was all business. But Dad said, after the races, I don't care if it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't have nobody calling me but you. Call me collect. But we were fast, and won the preliminary night. So that Friday night, Kenny says, we had open trailers. He said, somebody's going to have to stay with the car. So I slept in a sleeping bag beside the car all night.
No, I got this thing.
Now, Ike, and forgive me, you and I just met today, so we're talking 1972. How old were you at that point?
I'm 63 now, so...
So what, 45 years ago? So,
yeah, it's pretty young.
Yeah, so.
But that's okay. I mean, Knoxville is such a family place, and you don't have to worry about nothing, and, everybody treated you like you were gold.
Yeah.
And I had a Weikert shirt, so I was like family to everybody.
Yeah.
But that was the thing about that deal, and just like this Lupo thing, I remember Lupo got burnt really bad, and Dad bought him a uniform, because he had a wife and couple little kids, and so he bought him a uniform. That's how that thing all started out. And then we went to Harold Hank, and we looked at these cars, and he'd sell Don Edmond cars, and that's how that thing got started. But yeah, it was a whirl. I mean, it was a fun ride.
Looking back and we're sort of regressing here, but back to the comment that Todd made and talking about competitiveness. Was your dad full throttle from day one with this whole racing thing, as
Yes.
you remember?
Yeah, and everybody thinks he had a game face in racing. Wait till deer season comes. I mean, he was serious now. You had to be on your stand at a certain time. You got up early in the morning, did your feed, and then you hit my mom and dad's place for breakfast. So he was competitive in everything he did. I mean, second wasn't an option.
Yeah. I know we're getting a little bit ahead in the timeline here, but I want to take a look at the business. because racing can be pretty consuming. How about it? I mean, anybody up here can tell you that, regardless of your role. How did he maintain any kind of balance to control the business while putting all this energy into the racing enterprise?
Well, it was a family business. So, I mean, it's like Todd and myself and my two other brothers. I mean, we worked all the time, and then we worked to go to the races. And that's just the way it was. And he was high on everything he did. I mean, he was. I mean, just very competitive, and he just did the best job that, you know, you could always ask.
Now, he certainly had some fine talent behind the wheel, but, and I know we're talking about an era where guys were a little bit more creative as far as, and I think Randy, you and I have talked about this at different times, about being able to innovate and actually build a car rather than pulling stuff off the shelf. But what was his edge there? Because, I mean, he had good drivers, but he certainly had fine equipment.
Yeah, I mean, he just, if something didn't work, he'd change it and make it work. I mean, it's just the way it was. I mean, if a car didn't work, or he'd get another one. I mean, he just never, that second wasn't an option to him. He just very competitive.
Yeah. Do you think it's a situation where excellence attracts excellence? So he's putting everything he can into this operation to make it successful. So there's other people around the racing community, whether they be engine builders, mechanics, fabricators, who are outstanding in their field, who are sort of drawn to him because of that. Is that a possibility?
I think so. I mean, it's just, I mean, he did everything himself. I mean,
okay.
His own sponsors, everything, and that's what he liked to do. I mean, that's what he drove on.
Yeah, yeah. Numbers tell a great story, and we've said that time and again, but we look at the success he had early on. Kenny Weld with over 100 wins between 72 and 74. What are some of your remembrances from Kenny Weld?
Wow. I got numerous amount. I used to stop down at Logan'sville when I would drive a truck to Baltimore, and I'd swing by, and of course Dad would always question me, it takes me so long to get home. So, of course, I couldn't, sometimes I would make an excuse, and other times I would tell him, because my dad didn't tolerate anybody to lie. None whatsoever. But I remember one time I went into a shop. Well, first of all, when we hired Kenny Weld, it wasn't even going to get off the ground because Dad wanted the cars at home.
Okay.
And Kenny is one of these guys that work all night. So they decided that they wanted to do everything in Logan'sville.
Okay.
But I'm going to back this whole thing up.
Mm-hmm.
Dad said to me one day, he said, do you think we can hire Kenny Weld? I said, Dad, he don't have any money. He's going to go back home. He's broke. And if you can hire him. So I jumped in a vehicle and drove to Logan'sville, and I invited him and Mariette and Debbie was little up to dinner. And that's how he got started. We hired him at our kitchen table.
Did your dad help him out financially there to get started? Like Kenny had some bills, I read somewhere that he had to pay off, and he loaned him some money. Is that, Todd, you recall?
I don't know the exact number, but he did. He had some outstanding bills that he needed help with, and Pop scratched him a check and made that deal to get him straightened up. Yep.
I'd say that was a pretty good move for both those fellas.
Well, I want to tell you something else. Our first race was at Hagerstown, and we always carried 2 cars. So here come Stevie Smith with his helmet bag, and he was going to drive the backup car. Well, that didn't work out very well because that's competition. So it didn't go over good with Dad. So that didn't happen. But I thought, oh my gosh, here we are now. We got started, got everything organized. Now it's going to fall apart again, But it didn't. We worked through it, and it was very, it was interesting there for a while. Let me tell you. But the big thing is, when I went to Logan'sville, he had old blue tore apart, like bare metal changing bars. I thought, oh my gosh, my dad's going to fire him. But they worked through that deal. But at the Nationals, Floyd Travis noticed it right off the bat. that he did this, but the car was extremely fast and it kind of smoothed over, but that wasn't too good of a deal either, for
Yeah.
a couple minutes.
I've had a recollection while you were talking about Kenny and his innovative tendencies. Bruce Ellis, the announcer at Williams Grove Speedway, shared with me an occurrence from years ago. Bruce and his wife were both educators, his now deceased wife, Denise. And Bruce said there was a day at Williams Grove, he had an office downstairs below the main office at one point, and he was in there talking with Kenny. And Denise walked in for a short period of time. Now, Denise's area of expertise in education, she would test people for IQ. And she was in there for a couple minutes, Bruce said, and she left. And later they were talking, and she asked, I think, who this was, and Bruce explained it was Kenny Weld. And Denise says, I had certainly not had the opportunity to assess him formally, but she said, I can tell you, and just listening to him, that man's a genius. And is that the type of tendency, maybe a little quirkiness here and there that comes with that level of intelligence?
Yeah, I don't know, if a car don't work or something, he'll make it work, or he'll start over and build another one. But he had a roadster that he built in Kansas City one time and brought it in here. And, you know, it was an extremely good car because he had them box cars, you know, the box. And they worked, but he brought the other car in, that 31 car, that was a great car.
Mm.
But that's the way he was. The whole racing family was like that.
Yeah. We talked about the back-to-back Knoxville wins. I think 72 was wingless, 73 with a wing. So that just elevates, I think, the significance there. I've got a brief quote here from your father, and I want you to comment on this if you would, Ike. The wins at Knoxville have been the most satisfying of my career as a car owner.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I was at 1972, and then I went out this year with Todd. I had a world awakening there.
How about it?
Oh my gosh.
Times they are changing.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, just a blink and you won't make the field.
Yeah.
And it's a huge deal.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. All right, and Ike, we'll come back to you. And again, if you have anything you'd like to jump in on, please do. Randy Wolfe, always a pleasure, sir. Good to see you today. How you been, man?
Thanks.
Doing well?
Sure. Yeah, to.
Tell us about your time with Bob Weikert.
Well, I was there for real long, but it was an interesting time, and I was glad I had the opportunity to drive for him. Like both Todd and I said, he was sure competitive, and he wanted to win, which most of the owners do. But he worked pretty hard at it, and I would say that in today's racing, we could use more Bob Weikerts. You know, somebody that's flamboyant, somebody that's stir up the crowd, somebody that's competitive, you know, somebody that's alive. But he did a lot for local racing, a lot that other people don't know. You know, he helped many other racers that he competed with and, you know, against. So he was certainly an asset, which most of you already know that, but it's just worth mentioning again, and sorely missed. And when I was there, even though I was there that long, it was easy to form a bond with all the kids. And that was really cool, because it was certainly a family-oriented and farm-oriented group. And we would have these big meals, and Winnie, she would cook these huge meals, and there would be 2 tablesfuls of people. And when I was there, I could kind of eat a lot, even though I was thin, and they'd get a big kick out of that. So when the meal was finished, or near the end, there was left over to say, give it to Randy, give it to Randy, give it to Randy. So finally one day, Bob looked at me, because I mentioned about having a meeting with the Welds at the kitchen table. Let me tell you what, a lot of business and a lot of life went on at that kitchen table. And so Bob would get a kick out of all this food I would eat. So this is probably my favorite story. He said, one time he said, you know, son, which he always said, that was one of his liners, son. He said, you know, my dad told me once, if you wanted a rabid dog to run hard, not to feed him. And I said, oh, really? He said, also, though, he said if you wanted a field horse to really do hard work, you feed him a lot. I said, I like the one about the horse better. And I'm telling you, he howled. And Bob Weikart was a lot of fun. So, and like I said, wasn't there really that long, but I can tell you one thing. Out of all the great drivers that have driven for Bob Weikart and had tremendous wins, he had a favorite. And he sits 2 guys next to me. So I think that's a guy that does speak next.
Oh, you're skipping Charles.
We can talk.
We'll come back to it. Charlie's not getting off the hook. Yeah, he's not getting off that easy. Before we jump down here, real quick, you're okay. How old were you when you were running, Randy, for Bob?
23.
Okay. Yeah, so you probably could put it away, even though you not big around. Yeah, 23. All right. Yeah, I'm sure of that. Randy mentioned, and it's been a theme here, that there's an expectation for winning, and Bob Weikart's drivers indeed won. Bob himself said, if you check their records, he's referencing his drivers here, they're all winners. I took Randy Wolfe, he won 9 features one year. I took Bobby Davis Jr., he won 26, and that was just during an interview. So there was success. You said you weren't with him for real long, but certainly there was a degree of success there, even in a short time.
Well, I did forget about many things, and this isn't about me, but when I was there, Dick Hench was the wrench. And a lot of the reason I got there was because of Dick, and he's another guy that I sorely miss. And Todd today is married to Dick's daughter, and so yeah, it was a cool time.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You go ahead and pass that down, but Todd, I'm going to hand you this microphone just for a second. Could you share the story about how you ended up married to Dick's daughter? That was a pretty neat story.
Yeah, a lot of people asked how my wife and I met, and she's from Perry County, I'm from Adams County, so an hour and a half away from home. It's not, you usually meet someone, marry someone within your hometown or whatnot, but I said, well, we met in Florida. And they said, you met Perry County girl in Florida? I said, yeah. I said, her, and what it was, and she was working for Pop, and I think Kaufman was driving the car, and he took his whole family down to Florida for the races that winter, and I flew down for a weekend to go to the races, and got to meet Laurie and come back and started dating, and we ended up married. So we kept it in the family, the racing family, that's for sure.
Well, that's a great story. Just fly down for the weekend, and you end up with a life partner. That's a sweet deal there, my friend. We're going to move down to Paul Pitzer, but before we do, I want to throw this out here. Ike was talking about, and this is such a great quote here, he was talking about when Kenny came on board and the fact that he was struggling a little financially here. On his relationship with Bob Weikart, Kenny Weld said, quote, I was a relatively young man, a long way from home. Bob Weikart was like a second father to me. As far as racing goes, well, he pretty much gave me the keys to the family car, gave me anything I wanted. When a person bestows upon me that kind of faith and trust, I'll do anything not to disappoint him. Paul Pitzer, welcome back. Good to see you, friend.
Thank you.
Kenny, in his quote here, says Bob bestowed upon him a great degree of faith and trust. Was that a relationship that you had with Bob Weikart, or was yours a little different dynamic?
Well, no, I don't think mine was any different. He always treated me good. And everybody he liked, he treated good. But if you got on the wrong side of him, there was another side that we probably won't talk about.
Your tenure started, what, about 74?
74.
Okay.
The only reason I got into that was I was working for Kenny when he had the 31 Roadster and he was driving for Don Rice out of Bedford. And being in Loganville, I was close, so I helped him out after hours when I got off work. And then he went to Weikert. And then he was driving for Bud Grimm for 1 year in there too. And then he went to work for Bob. And I was driving for Mike Gerson at the time. And then Kenny came to me that winter and said, are you interested in running a team car? He said, I'm going to go USAC and Bob wants a local car. So because Kenny said he was going USAC, I agreed to it because I knew deep down it wouldn't work if we were both out of the same garage. And my prediction came true. It got to be a silent garage for a while. Kenny was a good innovator, like you said, and he understood race cars in and out.
1974, two-car team. You were primarily Sealands Grove, is that correct?
Yeah, that was my favorite track, yeah.
Another great year, 29 wins. Kenny had 29, you picked up 13 of your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were at Penn National one time. I can tell you a little story. It was in 74, and Bob and Winnie were up in the stands, and he told me at the race, he said, someone was behind me that really hated you and Kenny. Said every time either one of you come to the track, she was booing. So that night Kenny won and I ran second. And Bob said, when the race was over, I stood up and turned around and said, honey, can you go along and help me? I need money. I need help to haul this money to my car. And I'm sure he did that.
Oh, that is beautiful.
I was there.
You were there, Todd?
I was there when he did that, and this lady was a heavy-set lady, and I can remember her exact words. Go to hell, you bastard!
He had a way of bringing it out of people, I guess. Paul, you had a pretty good run with Bob Weikert as far as your tenure and your level of success. How about it?
Yeah, I certainly couldn't complain. I wasn't a full-time racer, and I think that hurt some. Because I worked a job through the day, and I didn't have the time to pay attention to the car like Kenny and the guys did. And one story I don't know that anybody here knows, when Kenny was driving for Don Rice. Of course, Don Rice had a Ford dealership, and all the motors had to be Ford then. And we couldn't keep head gaskets in the car. Every race would drop out. So it was Easter weekend, and I didn't go to the races with him that Sunday. So then somebody called me and said, hey, Kenny won the race last night at Hagerstown. So I went up to the garage Monday night, I said, oh, I heard you won. He said, yeah, but look at the car, you see anything different? Saturday night, he put a Chevy motor in it. So I said, what did Don think of that? He said, Don doesn't know it yet. So I believe it might have been till Tuesday till I got up enough nerve to call Don. And Thursday, Rice's crew was in there cleaning out the garage.
That was that. Paul, you said you didn't feel that you weren't a full-time racer. You didn't feel like you had the time to dedicate the car that maybe some other guys would because of your daytime commitments. But yet, we take a look at your record, and somehow you managed to make some time to do some traveling. You had wins, and I'm looking here, mid-70s, say 75 to 80. You had wins at Lake City, Florida, Gibsonton, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, and Syracuse. So you were not only getting around, you were getting it done.
Yeah, and along with that, in '74, Ohio started running the Wednesday night races. So 3 of us went out there pretty regular, Lynn, me, and Kramer. And I don't think anybody want to race out there except one of us 3. But I would take vacation Wednesday. We'd leave Wednesday morning and then drive all night Wednesday night after the race, because my 2 crewmen, they work full-time too. So we drive all night and go to work Thursday.
Wow, that's dedication there. 1979, USAC opener at Reading.
Yeah, that was a good day.
How about it? Tell us about that. Before Paul gets into his story, let me tell you, when he crossed the finish line, here was some notables behind him in this order: Sheldon Kinzer, Smokey Snellbaker, Bobby Jones, Rich Vogler.
Yeah, well, back then USAC was funny. You had to have a physical, and you had to get a temporary license to run with them and jump through hoops. And the car that's out back there, the Morton Heller bought, is a car we raced. And that was a car that Floyd and Ronnie were trying out. It was called a monocoque car. Most of the strength in the car is the body itself. And they were great innovators. It's got submarine glue on it and submarine rivets holding this body onto the framework. So USAC wasn't sure about that. We had to jump through some hoops there, but finally they agreed to it. So now they were ready to sign in. I still remember this about the race too. The registrar's name was Don Bright. So I went there and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Paul Pitzer. I'm here for a temporary permit." So he stood back and said, "So you're Paul Pitzer?" He said, "Let me tell you something. Tonight you're going to race against men." I said, "Well, I'll do the best I can. We'll see." So to be truthful, I wouldn't run the race if a yellow wouldn't have come out. Because Sheldon, he was a USAC champion that year, and he was so far out front. But when the green came out on the restart, Sheldon was running around the pole, and I just went around him on the outside. Pretty easy, really. It wasn't any racing there on. When the race was over, and USAC has a big deal, they have like a little press conference they want to have. So I went in there, and they wanted to start this. Tommy Nicholson was the guy in charge of USAC sprint cars. So he tried to start. I said, "Wait a minute, you're not all here yet. I want to see Don Bright." And Tommy said, "No." He said, "Don don't come to these meetings." I said, "Well, I don't feel like having an interview without him here." So he sent somebody to get Don. And it went a little bit, and Don come in, red as could be. He knew what was going to happen. So he come in, and I said, "Don, you want to tell these guys what you told me out there?" And he wouldn't fess up to it, so I told him. And then Don said, "Yeah, that's right, I did say that." But my last couple of years of racing, most of it was USAC. And I had a lot of good times racing USAC on the dirt. I was competitive with them in most of the racetracks. Had fast time on Terre Haute. And to me, it was great fun to be racing with guys I only read about. And I told somebody today about Gary Bentonhausen was racing then, and he had a brother Merle that lost an arm racing. So Merle had the Goodyear dealership. He went to all the USAC races with Goodyears. And Merle took a liking to me, and one day he come up and he said, "Hey," he said, "roll me a 16-inch wheel down there and just walk away." So about an hour later, he come back rolling the wheel. He said, "Here, run that tire once." Well, it was like nothing I ever ran. And here, what it was Gary Bentonhausen, being the champion he was, he got all of USAC's experimental tires. And Merle was feeding them to me. I probably ran 7 or 8 of them until Gary found out. And I'd stopped that.
Bob Weikert commenting on Paul Pitzer. Paul Pitzer was the fiercest competitor who ever drove for me. He knew only one way to drive, and that was with the throttle to the floor. Didn't matter where he was on the track or in what position, Pitts was charging. Is that about right?
Yeah. Well, Bob's deal was, Pittsy, you run as hard as you can. If you break it, I'll fix it.
Well, yeah, that's you're in a pretty good place there as a driver, I would say. That's his mentality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you couldn't ask for any more.
Yeah.
And you talked about turning the keys over to Kenny. He turned the keys over to Kenny for a 74 Monte Carlo, I believe. And the next year he turned the keys over to me for a 75 Monte Carlo.
Wow.
So he did turn the keys over.
Yeah, literally, huh? Paul, you talked about having professional commitments, and I know with your history that was difficult to make that happen, balancing your daytime job and your pursuit of racing. What, if you would you share with us your professional capacity, what you did full time?
Yeah, I was a lineman for an electric company. I climbed poles for a living. Back then, we didn't have bucket trucks. We all climbed. It was hard work, but it was good work, and I made good money my whole life. I tell you, looking back at my life, the only thing I regret is the years I was racing. I missed my boys growing up. I had 2 sons, and I missed their whole childhood. So now I guess I go to all my grandchildren's functions.
That's good. That's good. And interestingly enough, the day I met Ray Tilley here at the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing, that was the one thing when he looked back at his career, he said, if I could do something different, that was it. I feel like I missed out so much. And another thing I remember from the discussion with Ray was, today, the icebreaker at Lincoln is the end of February?
12 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Did Wayne Harper send you by chance? No, okay. So it's the end of February, and we race through the end of October. Sometimes they're, have something in Charlotte, of course, November, whatnot. But races, we were racing primarily from and if I recall, he said Easter through Labor Day is the majority of the time there. So you guys were really getting a lot of racing done in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, we raced 3 nights a week, and Williams Grove always opened the Sunday after Easter.
Yeah.
And like you said, Lincoln started before, and I think Hagerstown started before them too now.
Yeah. All right, Paul, we'll come back to you. Again, thank you for being here. It's good to catch up with you. We'll talk to the guy next to you and tell you what getting off the hook. Charlie Garrett, engine builder extraordinaire. Let me tell a story about Charlie just real quickly. I had the opportunity to visit his shop. All this was probably 15, 20 years ago or so. And somebody introduced me to Charlie, and he was kind enough to come over and say hello. And when I walked in, I immediately was struck by how organized his shop is, and how, as engine shops go, it was just beautiful. And as we chatted just for a minute, he was very kind. He was generous with his time. I don't remember what you had in your hand, Charlie, but it was an engine component of some type, and a drop of oil fell off and hit the floor. And Charlie immediately excused himself, walked over to the wall, pulled off a paper towel and wiped it up. You could eat off this man's floor, and I know that's an old saying, but you literally, and I'm sure it's probably still the same, can eat off this man's floor. And I think that speaks to his level of detail and excellence and why he's been sought after for so many years. Charlie, again, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Getting back to my shop, that's one of the reasons Bob Weikart liked my shop, because he's not going in a shop that's sloppy. That's not Bob Weikart. He brought a lot of people down to my shop over the years that came to town, and he wanted to show that. And I like to think that reflects your work a little bit, to me it does. And if you have oil on the floor and you step on it, now you got to clean the whole damn floor instead of just that one spot.
Yeah.
You can keep it clean, but you got to work at it. But anyhow, getting back to Bob Weikart, he was the most entertaining owner I've ever met in my life. He knew how to get the people going. He was good for the sport of sprint car racing for sure. And it's an honor to sit beside Randy Wolfe here and Paul Pitzer. I had the opportunity to be involved with them guys over my lifetime, and I was lucky. Paul Pitzer, without a doubt, was one of the toughest drivers I've ever met. I've seen him. You got to remember, he raced. We didn't have closed-in helmets. He had a handkerchief over his mouth. That's the way he raced. And I was at the Grove one night when something hit him in the mouth and broke his tooth. He didn't come in. He came in with blood all over him, but he didn't pull in. You know. But anyhow, Paul Pitzer was Bob Weikert's style. He liked somebody, like Paul said, you bust it up, I'll fix it. You know. But anyhow, a story about Paul. Bob bought a motor from Smokey Yunick. I don't know what year, maybe the late 70s, I'm not sure. It was when we ran the 312 engines. I think they were 312s. They weren't 410s, they were much smaller.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I bought a Smokey Yunick engine. He asked me to rebuild it for Williams Grove. Paul says to me, we got to do good tonight because Bob's got a lot of important people coming into town, and we got to be good. When we went through, we didn't make it in the heat race. I don't remember. Maybe Paul will remember. We got a flat or something broke, but we didn't make it through the heat. I don't know if there was a B main or how that was, but we didn't make the race. And I'm like, this isn't good. Well, we're going out for the feature, and I'm stupid. I'm just young at this time, at this team. How are we going out for the feature? Well, it ends up Bob slipped somebody some money, Paul over, I think, but I'm not sure. I think it was Paul over. Hey, Paul, just tell him you can't make it, and here's $600 or whatever. I don't know what he gave him. More than Paul was going to make it. But anyhow, we start last, right? We start dead last, as I remember. And Pitts comes up through there driving that car. It was, well, on the cushion, of course, you wouldn't think he'd be down low. That wasn't Pitzer style. He wasn't a Donnie Kreitz.
Right.
He was a cushion man. But anyhow, he kept coming and coming. I thought, we might win this thing. And I think when the front stretch hit the wall or something, do you remember, Pitts?
Yeah, I was passing Paxton.
But anyhow, he broke the header. He knocked most of the header off a damn car. And they kept running it, and it burned the valve cover gasket out then. But now it's smoking, and this thing's going to blow up. It's going to blow up. I think we got to second. We didn't win it. We ran second, as I remember. Do you know Pitts who won?
Yeah, Jim and Schaefer won it, and we ran second.
So we ran second. Well, Weikert comes down just happy. You'd have thought we did win. He was so happy. Slaps him on the back. Pitts, you did a hell of a job. He said, I was going to give you all the money if you won this damn thing. What did he give you, Pitts?
I don't want to say.
Well, anyhow, I know that's what he said. I was going to give you the whole purse if you'd have won this damn thing. But anyhow, Paul come out of that car. He's pulling his pants leg up, and I swear there was skin coming with it. He had so much hot oil on him. He was just a tough character. I mean, I've seen it time and time again with him. That today they don't, drivers, not that they're bad drivers, we just got more safety today. You know, the cars are safer, but I don't think a lot of guys would drive these things the way Pitzer did it. You know, he did his for them. And then another story, we're going down to Atlanta, Georgia, I think it was, for the mile, on a mile race. Now we got a big block, right, Pitt?
Yeah, that's right.
We got all these big blocks. We're going down there against these little motors. They all got small blocks, you know. Well, we know Pitzer, the bigger the track, the better. He loves those miles. Well, we won the first race. I think we're going to run Saturday and Sunday, but we won. And Bob says to me, the motor's pretty hot, ain't it? Yeah, I said, it's pretty hot. He said, you tell him. I said, I ain't telling, you tell him. I said, you're the owner. He kept saying, you tell him. I said, you tell him. I'm not making him mad. And he said, Pitts is pretty hot. And Pitts goes, something like this, you know, well, we ain't gonna race. We're gonna load up. I don't think we're gonna run tomorrow because it's so damn hot. Well, the problem was they had these damn Dow jets in the car, which whoever invented the damn thing to hold the shot in because they don't belong in a race car, you know. That was an engine builder's nightmare to let a driver adjust his fuel from the cockpit. And they just keep turning it till they think they're going fast, and then they burn the damn motors up, you know. But anyhow, those stories, they were all true. And the other thing about going to Atlanta was, and I'll never forget this, I think Fred Granville, right? Pitzer was along, Randy Ruth, and me and Pitzer. Well, Bob's orders from the get-go is, now look, we're going down there to race, no damn drinking, no women, no drugs, we're there to race. That didn't all hold true. No, you got Fred Granville and Randy Ruth together, God couldn't stop that, I don't think. But anyhow, Bob Weikert was, he always wanted me to marry him. Why don't you marry me? I said, I am married, Bob. He said that to me many times, but he was funny. He was really funny and a good guy to travel with. And I think his boy said it, everybody says it. If he liked you, he'd do anything for you. And but don't lie to him and don't make him mad. Now, the first thing I had to learn about Bob Weikert was don't eat vegetables. You got to eat meat. He ain't no damn vegetable. I like vegetables. But anyhow, I have a lot of good memories being with him. I grew up there in the evenings with Paul, and I actually got to know Paul through a friend of mine named Wolfe, who died of cancer, and he was doing the body work for Paul and them, and they got me to come out and start doing some motor work, and we bought all those big blocks. He bought what, 3?
3 of them. You bought
3 big blocks. I think they had electronic fuel injection on, and we converted them to constant flow. And but to get down there in the mile against those small blocks, they didn't have much of a chance because it was a track you needed. That would be a track you would need. And of course, like I said, the rougher the track, the bigger the track, the more Paul Pitzer loved it. And that's just his style. And that's what Weikert liked. Weikert wouldn't like the Donnie Craig's driver or a guy like that. He liked those guys that was to the floor on the cushion at all times. And he was exciting. He was very exciting. But that's about all the stories I have, you know, just a lot of good memories from Bob, and I wouldn't have traded for the world. There's, would I have my life to live over in racing, period, I wouldn't trade for the world. A lot of people ask me, because, you know, I drag raced for 38 years out of my pocket, out of my own pocket. And people would say, don't you regret the money you spent? I said, no. You laid that money on this table, I don't know if it would fit, but if you did, and he said, there's your money, but we're going to remove all your memories, all the things you learned, all the friends you made. That gets removed, there's your money. I wouldn't think 2 seconds. I'd say, stick it up your butt. What am I going to do with it? You know? Now, you can't let racing ruin your business. You can't let it ruin your family life. If you do, you won't. It's not going to work. It won't work. You just can't do that. And you wouldn't be in the business. I wouldn't have raced 38 years out of my pocket if I put my race car ahead of my business. The business has to operate and be successful, so I had money to race. But there's nothing wrong with racing. It's some people think it is. Like I hear somebody, well, Paul said, but he missed a lot of time with his boys, which you will. But then you look at baseball players, any professional sport, it's going to consume a lot of your time. You know, so you can't. It isn't just racing that does that. It's if you want to be good at what you do, it's going to consume all the time you can give it. I said racing will demand all the money and all the time that you can give it, and you're going to have to give it a lot of time if you're going to be successful. You've got to really want to do it more than anything else, or you will not be successful at it. You just won't.
Charlie, how did you first meet Bob Weikert? Was that your association with Paul, or?
Well, I think my friend Wolfe was doing their body work on the cars in the evenings, okay. And I'm thinking Woody introduced me to Paul. I think I'm right, and of course there it developed, you know. And Bob knew that I would. You see, sprint car racers generally came to drag racers for knowledge because drag racers always have been ahead on the technology of engine development, you know, and that's a fact. I mean, in reality today, and I could be wrong, but I say if drag racers entered into sprint car racing full time, which I never do, but if they did, they would figure better ways to hook these cars up. I really do. The one thing I have against sprint car owners and drivers and mechanics We are in the day and age of onboard computers, onboard telemetry. You need to have that on your car. Yeah, you ain't allowed it for racing, but they can't stop you from testing. And what you don't, it would be like me trying to dyno test without a computer. You can't do it. You can't do it. I mean, we did years ago, we did, but you're never going to learn. You got to have, it's what you don't know that's going to hurt you. We are in the day and age of electronics, and I don't like computers. Hell, I'm an old-fashioned boy. I hate them, but you got to have them. You got to have them. Drag racing today, the thing I like about drag racing is a good crew chief knows where their problem is in a matter of seconds. They make a run, you come back, they look at the computers, they look at your time sheet. You can't hide nothing. The driver can't hide nothing because if you didn't cut a light, it's going to be on that sheet. It's going to give you all your incremental times, 60-foot times, 330 times, 1,000-foot, eighth mile. And then they know. I mean, they can look at your computers. Oh, the car spun its tires there. Now they got an advantage because they got a 4, 5, and 6 disc clutches, so they can adjust a lot of things going down that racetrack. You know, but sprint car racing is a much tougher game than drag racing as far as the driver. I wouldn't drive one. I wouldn't even consider it. I took a ride in the 2-seater at Williams Grove when Blaney had it, and it was the best thing I ever did. Even though I went to sprint car racing for many, many years, anybody that sits in the stands and says, boy, that damn driver, you better sit your ass in one, you know, because it got my attention, I'll tell you that. I was only a 360, you know,
Yeah.
wasn't no 410, and there's a lot of things going on. Those cars are shaking and vibrating. I remember after a couple laps in that thing, Timmy Schaefer was the driver, and I said to myself, I can't believe they line 24 of these things up and go wheel to wheel. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It really is. I drove drag cars that ran over 200 miles an hour, but it ain't the same as sprint car racing. When that corner come up, I thought, how in the hell are we going to get around this damn thing? I know one time I looked out, we might have been a foot off the walls, what it looked like to me, you know. But it's a tough business, and I admire anybody that's successful at it because it's way harder than it looks.
Charlie, just to put things in perspective for the folks here today, Charlie Garrett Racing Engines has been in business for how long now?
52 years. I opened at 65.
Okay. So drag racing was your, I guess, initial focus, and then you got into some sprint car racing over the years, just so the folks know. Can you tell us some of the teams you worked with? My first recollection in sprint car racing, and here I know I missed some folks, but I remember I think you built some engines for Tim Schaefer back around 01, I think, and then, does that sound right? And then you were exclusive to the Jason Myers team for a while, right?
I was, Bob Weikert would have been one of the early guys for sure, but did you mention Tim Schaefer? Who'd you say?
Yeah. Did you build for him? I thought you did when he was with the Selma show.
Tim Schaefer still runs one of my motors and does very well with it. Jason Myers was for sure a guy that was an incredible driver, and probably he wouldn't have been a Bob Weikert style. He had that finesse, you know. There was many nights he'd come to me and said, "Look, we got to calm this thing down. We got to remove some power." And he knew that. That didn't make him a winner, but he knew it gave him a chance to hook that car up, you know. And let's face it, by feature time, qualifying today in sprint car racing is so critical. You're fighting for thousandths of a second. And anybody that knows today, if you don't qualify good and you ain't in that dash, your night's junk, you know. It's just so competitive today, you know. But we won, of course, with Jason Myers and the team. That when they put that team together in 09, we missed beating Donnie Schatz by, I think, 18 or 19 points. And then in 10, we won the championship with Jason. 11, we won the championship with Jason. And the point spread was getting wider and wider because the number one thing we did when we formed that team, we don't share information. We shared no information. And I said, if we're going to get an advantage, we got to do our own cylinder head work. We got to. And it started to click. I mean, if that team would have stayed together, Donnie Schatz would not dominate the day. I can guarantee you, because they were going to put a 2-car team together with Stevie Smith as a backup team. And I think Jason and Stevie had a lot of the same driving style. And then they could share information. And when you got two-car team and share information, that's an advantage. You know? You get double feedback all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Appreciate you getting us up to speed on that, Charlie. We're at about 2:15, so we're going to take a break here shortly. But before we do we have any questions for the panel? Anybody? All right, got one back here. Yeah.
I was curious to, when Kenny built that modified van ready, was that Bob Weikert's idea or was that Kenny's idea?
When Kenny built the modified to take to Reading, was that Kenny's idea or Bob's idea? Anybody in particular? Anybody want?
Kenny's idea. Yeah, I'm sure it was Kenny's idea. At that time, the modifieds were paying, their purses were a lot better than the sprint cars, and Kenny seen that opportunity, and he had the ability and the vision that he had something going with the modified. So I think part of the well, it was absolutely Kenny's idea, but with Dad, Dad was 100% behind it.
All right. Yes, sir.
Comment about the modifieds. I was in the pits the first week. He came to Reading with that and just about beat Tobias, I guess. The buzz in the pits were unbelievable when he came into that modified. Not all positive, but.
Well, he revolutionized the whole car. It was an incredible
They
car.
were calling it a sprint car, you know.
Yeah.
all kinds of-
Yeah. Yes, sir.
The first week before the race, before they had the car ready, they came to Reading, and I don't know where's Bob or Kenny's truck, probably Bob's beige, I think, or silver. And in the back of the truck, they pulled it up to the pits there. They had a bare aluminum 427 box sitting there, and Bob and Kenny was sitting on the tailgate, and everybody's looking at that like, And I know some of them, you guys gonna have things a little different for this year, so there's gonna be some change around here, and they're like, well, okay.
Anybody else? All right, so I got a question for you. Do I have any hockey fans in the house? Anybody like hockey?
What's hockey?
Yeah. All right, so if there's a rules infraction, the offensive team is moving toward the goal, and they have the advantage, and there's a rules infraction, what happens? Delayed penalty, correct? All right, we've got a delayed penalty we're handing out today. Steve Bubb, who oversees our library, brought me this just a lined piece of notebook paper, and it's handwritten. It is a letter to Jack Gunn from the early 1970s. And this fan has a complaint about a driver, and the driver is here today, so we're going to hand out the penalty. And before we go any farther, I will tell you that the driver is not on the panel. Dear Mr. Gunn, you were quick to spot the rough riding in the late model division. Now open your eyes during the sprint features, or any sprint races for that matter. For the last 3 weeks in a row, a certain driver has had me so mad that I've thrown full Cokes in disgust, even though it cleans me out just to buy one of them. And his name isn't Kenny Weld, like you want it to be. His name is Van May. Van, you'll be penalized 2 spots during your next hot lap session down at Lattimore. Fair enough? All right.
Hey, doesn't Van get a rebuttal on that one?
Sure. What do you got?
That could have happened.
And with that, we will take a break.